Production funding for Ruckus has been provided by a gift from the Hartwig family and viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly, and our topics this week: the president takes aim at the NRA, the Missouri and Kansas legislatures fire up for another session, and some fiery protest about local TIF and spending plans, plus, of course, roast and toast. But we begin with our interview segment and welcome filmmaker Michael Price to talk about his latest production, Our Divided City. The city, of course, is Kansas City, Missouri, and the documentary focuses on violent crime and other problems east of Troost. Portions of the film will be shown at the KCPT Crime Caucus, a public forum intended to enhance a community dialogue on violence in our city. The forum will be held next Tuesday, January 19th at 6 p.m. at the Paseo Academy, 4747 Flora Avenue. Our Divided City will be shown in its entirety on KCPT, January 29th at 7 p.m., followed by a special edition of Kansas City Week in Review that will feature the Crime Caucus and the community discussion on this important topic. For more information or to register to attend the event, go to kcpt.org. Michael Price, welcome to Ruckus. Thanks for joining us. You're a native of the UK, moved to Kansas City a couple of years ago and married a Kansas City woman.
I did, yes. We moved over here at the end of 2013, and I've fallen in love with Kansas City as well as with my wife.
Obviously, Michael, I've not seen your film. Neither have the people watching the program. So if you will, tell us a bit about it, what the goal was and what you hope people will get from it.
Well, the film itself asks the question, why is Kansas City seeing the high rates of homicide that it is at the moment? And to answer that question, we go into the area of the city that sadly and tragically is subject to the most of these homicides, seeing most of these homicides and the high violent crime rate. We go into the community east of Troost. We spend time with families who live east of Troost and with the community leaders there to find out what's the root causes of this violence.
Well, you're calling it Our Divided City, and for decades, Kansas City has been divided east from west, east of Troost. Originally, I suppose the reason the division occurred was segregation. Segregation's been outlawed for 50 years, and I know things take time, but why is Kansas City still divided?
Kansas City is still divided racially and in terms of the poverty as well. Most of the black communities to be found east of Troost. Levels of segregation there are still very high, although it is improving. There's also a lot of poverty as well to the east of Troost. As to why that community is still segregated, it's because you're not allowing, it's not an easy business for other families to move into that community, for families with a higher rate of income to move in. And as well, white families are not so keen to move into that community either for a whole range of issues, some of which is prejudice, but some of which as well is a concern of the high violent crime rate and the school district as well. There are concerns about the school district.
There has been a dysfunctional school district in Kansas City, Missouri for a long, long time.
There has been, and the school district at the moment, of course, has provisional accreditation and is fighting hard to gain full accreditation. It's a school district that's on the up.
People who lived in Kansas City all their lives tell me at one time the East Side was a thriving area during a period of segregation. Not endorsing segregation, but I'm told at one time there were intact families and a business community, doctors, lawyers, dentists.
Yeah, if you speak to the community leaders east of Troost, those who've lived there for decades, they talk about east of Troost being a village in the 50s, 60s and 70s that looked after its children, that had a lot of pride, that looked after its blocks. That's the type of strong community that we need to return to, a community that is looking after itself, a community that is able to see the high violent rates come down through its own efforts.
Do governments at the local, state and federal level bear any responsibility for what's going on east of Troost?
There is a degree of responsibility that's shared by a range of state public organisations. Incarceration has played its part to try to break up black families. And incarceration in Missouri prisons over the last 3 decades or so for black males has doubled. It's estimated that that's doubled. That has not helped the situation east of Troost. Certainly not. You need strong male role models there. The children need to be following these male role models and keeping themselves out of trouble.
Do the residents of the East Side bear any responsibility?
99%, over 99% of people who live east of Troost are law-abiding taxpayers who just want to get on with their lives. I've spent a lot of time over this last year, 2015, east of Troost, and every single person that I met, and I met and spoke to a lot of people, were very, very friendly, were very interested in the project, and were nothing more, they were nothing less than welcoming.
Does the film suggest any cures for the problem?
This is a deeply entrenched problem. It's a very complicated, a very, very complicated problem. There is no quick fix. There is no short-term solution. It's going to take a number of different moving parts working together under strong leadership to see over time this high homicide rate come down.
We look forward to viewing your film. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you very much.
That is filmmaker Michael Price. For more information about the Crime Caucus and our divided city, go to kcpt.org. Now let's meet the panel and start a ruckus. Jim Heater is a former councilman and currently president and CEO of the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. Cynthia Wheeler is a marketing strategist. Mary O'Halloran is a media and communications consultant, and Ron Freeman is the former executive director of the Kansas GOP, now a motivational speaker and writer. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming in. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you.
Thank you. The gun violence that tops the news virtually every day in Kansas City gets national attention on ABC's Nightline program. Appearing as a guest, Mayor Sly James talked about Kansas City's 2015 homicide toll of 109, the highest since 2011. James complains that too little is being done and backs President Obama, who recently issued executive actions designed to strengthen background checks on potential gun owners. Obama accuses the National Rifle Association of spreading imaginary fiction, what other kind is there, that he is trying to take people's guns away. The NRA, in turn, criticizes the president for bypassing Congress on this issue, adding that the measures will have no impact on firearm-related violence. Question: do you see any middle ground between where James and Obama stand and the NRA's position? First Cynthia, then Mary.
Middle ground, I say they're probably about on the same page. I don't think there's any middle ground per se.
Between the NRA and Obama?
Well, between the NRA and Obama, no, there's no middle ground. Between Sly and Obama, they're on the same page.
They're on the same page, yes.
So I had the pleasure of speaking with Sly yesterday, just briefly, about his appearance on Nightline and his feelings. And he again reiterated his supporting the Obama administration utilizing Missouri as an example of what happens when you remove background checks. And you have to ask yourself, if we had 109 homicides in this in this last year, how many of those could have been prevented by background checks? That's not to say that if a bad guy wants a gun, he's going to get a gun, okay? Right. But if somebody who has a mental disability, which I think both sides agree to, I think both Republicans and Democrats strongly believe in supporting mental health care, we need to find a way to keep those guns from those individuals out of their hands.
Mary, any middle ground between Obama and James and the NRA?
No, the NRA is as far out there to the right as possible, and they dominate and control the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, both to an extent, with their amazing organizational and financial political skills. So that, there is no compromise with the NRA, not even on issues that 90% of the American people support. The president is, the fear-mongering that goes on in the NRA is really something to watch. The president or any recent president or any president of the United States has never been going for anybody's guns. Law-abiding citizens. What we're talking about here is, are we going to have background checks for those people that currently don't have to get them? If you go to a licensed federal dealer in most states, you have to get a background check. But
Is that not true in Missouri?
Well, no, it
No,
isn't
not
actually.
well,
it isn't. They lifted. We used to have to go to the sheriff.
The state
and get your permit.
obviated
repealed
the
in
federal law?
2007.
But they repealed. The
2007, yes, they
legislature
did. And it's
repealed
not
it.
about the Second Amendment. I think that if
No,
you want a
it's
gun,
not.
I want a gun. I'm 90 pounds. I want a gun. But the reality of the situation is, if I have to have a license to drive my car, if I have to have insurance to keep a house, if I have to do all these other things, adding a small segment of a requirement to carrying a gun should not be an issue.
You know,
Well,
it
this is
should-
not about concealed carry. First of all, the NRA
It's about owning.
The NRA argues.
So it's about gun ownership.
Well,
not
I have to
background
have
checks. Got it.
insurance to
The
have
NR
my car.
Hang on.
Makes sense.
The NRA argues it
does.
represents good people who just care about protecting themselves and their families. The president reviles the NRA. Is he being fair to these
Well,
people?
the NRA is a straw man. Because the bottom line, 2015, more background checks than any time really since 2011. Impact, minimal. Excuse me. They cite Missouri's lax gun laws as the problem. D.C., Chicago, tight gun laws, more crime.
Paris, France.
There's no correlation between these strict laws and gun violence. Where there is a correlation is when you have a group of 12 to 17-year-old males who don't have fathers in their homes. You have gun violence. You have violent crime in general. And so, excuse me, to say it's the
Poverty.
NRA, poverty's a factor as
I
well.
think poverty is the
Education's a
biggest
factor.
factor.
There's so many factors other than background checks.
Let me get Jim
don't
in
think there's
here.
anything wrong with
I'll talk to
background
Jim
checks.
for a second. Mayor James has appointed a committee to spend a year looking into ways to prevent violence in Kansas City, Missouri. Haven't we been there and done that before?
Well, I think there a lot of work has been done on this. I think there are, while I'm optimistic about the work that this particular commission, this task force will do, and I applaud for Mayor James for appointing it. Task forces and commissions are exactly that, and they make recommendations, and what's really important is what happens with those recommendations.
All right.
Let me just say one thing. Mayor James is to be applauded for the way in which he has worked with the county prosecutor, Jean Peters Baker, the police chief, and the U.S. Attorney for the Western District. They put together the Kansas City Nova program.
Great program.
And it really is a new approach to coordinating efforts, and they were on their way to a real reduction in homicides in Kansas City last year. And then,
What
Something
happened?
happened.
well,
Well, we don't know what
You have
happened.
Jean told me that if she could have one thing that was new, it would be some legislation to let us start controlling criminals getting their hands
Let
on
me
guns.
just wrap this
That'd be
up by
interesting.
saying, if I understand correctly, none of the mass killings we've experienced in this country would have been stopped if the regulations of President
I didn't
Obama.
say that. I didn't
No,
say that.
I'm saying-
That's a fact.
I'm saying
That's the
that
bottom
is a
line.
fact.
I
That if
didn't say
those, no, I said it is said that, not by any of you.
Right,
It's
right.
said by me that no regulation proposed by the
But what
president would have
would?
stopped the mass killings.
How-
I don't know what would have.
how
But
do
we're
I
going
know
on
that
to
it
the next
wouldn't have
topic.
stopped one or two of
Next
those?
topic. Bi-state legislators are back in action, or at least like to think they are. In Missouri, ethics reform is seen as a prime issue. In Kansas, the budget crunch is front and center, and as always, the focus is on the most costly item, public education. Residents in the metro area on both sides of state line can be affected by what these lawmakers do or don't do. Let's start with this. If you live on the Missouri side, what should you be paying attention to, Jim?
Two things. First of all, the calendar says it's 2016, which means it's leap year. It also means it's an election year. And I think one of the things that tends to happen in an election year is in state legislatures, including our Missouri General Assembly, not much happens. A lot of bills get introduced, a lot of speeches are made, but not a lot of real action occurs between the legislature and the governor in terms of what comes out at the end of the process. So I think we need to keep that in mind, that it is 2016.
Don't
election
expect too
year.
much.
Precisely. I also think that there's an important issue pending, for example, for all Kansas Cityans right now. In fact, there's a hearing occurring in the state Senate as we take this program this morning. There's a hearing about the Kansas City earnings tax, and there are legislators who would take away from St. Louis and Kansas City the right to collect their earnings tax, even though in Kansas City 5 years ago, the citizens of Kansas City, Missouri voted by 78% to keep that tax. And it's an important part of the city revenue. It's an important part of what makes Kansas City a great city.
State is trying to preclude the city from voting on this, right?
Precisely correct. And you know, you'd kind of like to think that your General Assembly would be doing things for cities like Kansas City and St. Louis, which are really two of the key economic engines of the state of Missouri, to help and enhance those cities, and to remove their ability to collect an earnings tax would be incredibly detrimental detrimental to the city of Kansas City, Missouri. We have to make sure that doesn't happen.
Mary, there's a lot of talk about ethics reform in Missouri. Whose ethics and what reform?
Lots of talk.
Whose
There's
ethics?
a lot of talk. Well, actually, there is, and I think the new speaker is to be commended for his willingness to be the speaker after the former speaker was. What did he do? I guess it wasn't a criminal act, but he was engaged in some kind of
Tryst
nefarious-
with an intern.
A tryst. A
An
trysting.
intern tryst.
He was trysting, apparently, or it is alleged. Good. I think there'll be some. I mean, they have to deal with this question of the relationships between the boys and the girls. And the boys are acting like boys, and the girls are there and don't have any authority. And it's the same old. It's the same old, same old. So they have to deal with that.
Campaign contributions, an area we hear a lot
I
about.
can't imagine
Why
that
that
this
would be a challenge.
extremely Republican, I mean, it's conservative or far-right legislature will put any limits on the amount of money that can be spent to elect them or anything. Here's one. When you leave the legislature, can you go right into the job
It's a lobbyist.
of
Right.
lobbying
But my
the
understanding-
committee you were previously the chair? I mean, that kind of thing just has to stop, but I don't see.
My
Okay,
understanding-
Jim, a lot of people watching the program live in Kansas.
Yes.
Kansas legislature back, I was going to say in action, maybe two words in. Well, maybe one word back, in action. In any case, what should we watch for?
You know, earlier this week, Governor Brownback gave his State of the State address, and interestingly, he never mentioned the elephant in the room, which are the extraordinary budget shortfalls that have occurred not just last year, but for each of the last several years under Governor Brownback's tax reduction program. And what's happening is that his budget director has acknowledged that they're going to be moving money from the Highway Transportation Fund, probably from certain children's funds. And one of the big issues is the impact of these budget shortfalls and the cuts that will necessarily have to occur on key areas like education. Education, whether it's kindergarten through 12 or community colleges or higher education, are one of the things that has really made Kansas, particularly the part of greater Kansas City on the Kansas side of the state line, really an important economic engine and driver for both states and for greater Kansas City. And we got to be really sure that that education particularly doesn't suffer because of those budget
And I
shortfalls.
think healthcare. I think healthcare is another issue, and the ability or willingness to accept federal money for healthcare. And
Cynthia, I
don't
was
think they would do
mentioning
that.
a couple weeks ago that Steve Rose, in one of his columns prognosticating what the year ahead will bring, says that at least 14 state legislators who are conservatives will lose their jobs, either to moderate Republicans or moderate Democrats.
Do I see that happening in
Do you
Kansas?
see that
with as
happening in
rural as it
Kansas?
is? No, I don't. Not as rural as Kansas is. No, I do not.
It's those rural guys.
I hope that you're
Well,
not
all
right.
the elections in Kansas don't take place in rural areas, do
Johnson County,
they?
no, they
No,
don't.
but I mean,
The question is whether
how
or not the
conservative
people
is
of
the state?
Kansas
Well, Ron,
will
It's
rebel
the
against.
people actually elected those people over there.
Yes.
They really did.
Do
They
you
told
They
think
them
love
this
to
is
do
going
what they
to
got
be a
there.
year when the legislature's up for election that we're going to see incumbent conservatives overturned?
Oh, no, not at all. Not in Kansas. That's not going to happen because, again, I think the people are conservative by nature, and they vote for what they want to see done in Topeka. Missouri is the same way, but it's an election year.
Well, but
Political
Ron, there isn't any Kansas-
political posturing and paybacks. That's what they do in state capitals.
Okay, we
I'm
gotta
with
move.
Ron, and we're firmly not on the same position on a lot of issues,
Okay.
and on that one,
That's
I'm
why.
with you.
Okay. Kansas City is known for a lot of things: the Royals, Chiefs, Jazz, Country Club Plaza, barbecue, boulevards, fountains, and maybe soon, if the trend doesn't stop, petition campaigns. There are at least two now in some stage of development. One involves the Downtown Convention Hotel. Another questions tax increment financing breaks for a Crossroads District project. And the omnipresent Clay Chastain is said to be planning yet another light rail petition campaign. One reason we see these petitions so often is the low number of signatures required to force an issue to a public vote. Perhaps, Ron, the next petition drive ought to be to change the rules for petition campaigns. That a good idea or not?
Well, I think that's the point. If you want to make a difference, change the rules. Don't sit here and say, well, you can't do this now, we want to stop you. Give the people should have a right to petition their government. If you want to set terms that make it more reasonable, so maybe 4,000 people,
Yeah.
people can't control 500,000, okay, that's fair, but let's do something about it instead of just saying these guys can't do it now. We need that right.
The right to seek a redress of grievances doesn't mean you have the right to have a vote.
No, but the problem here is people don't trust government's decision making. That's what it comes down
And
to.
it's reflective in Missouri as well. I mean, I'm jumping back to something earlier, but my understanding is that there's grassroots organizations in Missouri that are pushing for ballots to discuss the ethics reform.
Right.
Well,
And
yeah.
legislators
Well,
don't
they
want
can
that.
do that in Missouri. They
Yeah,
can't do it in Kansas.
But my
Correct.
point is, I'm
Correct.
defending his idea that you should have
Yeah.
the right to petition
But
what
the
you
point,
want
Jim,
of the people.
the point, Jim, is that not every city and not every state has a petition process where voters can get something on the ballot.
That's exactly correct. And the issue, let's just talk about Kansas City, Missouri for a moment. Under the city charter, 5%, a number equal to 5% of the folks who voted in the last mayoral election, which in the last mayoral election, because it was a pretty one-sided affair, the turnout was very low. So for the next 4 years, about 3,400 people can sign petitions to get an issue on the ballot, even an issue that their elected representatives,
And
the
that-
council members of Kansas City, Missouri, have acted upon. And you really can't run a city government in that fashion.
No, but that's the issue.
That's the
That's
point.
the
The
issue.
issue-
The
the issue is
5%
what
is
Jim
the
said.
issue.
If I can just-
Mary, hang on. Cynthia, you were starting.
Well, I'm saying that's the issue. I don't think that any of us believe, regardless of your party line, whether or not the people should be involved in decision making. I think the issue is the percentage required in order to petition. And I think the challenge is
Some people-
we should get the vote out.
Some
We
people
can't
might
argue about
question
that
whether
anymore.
people should be involved in the decision-making process beyond voting for those people who will decide in a republic, which is our form of government at the state, national, and local
Whether or not
levels.
we should be
the
involved.
voters decide who decides. The voters don't decide every issue.
If that were the
The petition is an age-old mechanism. It's political science will talk about this in terms of it's kind of like a safety valve in case the government gets out of control and there's some kind of big difference between the people governing and the people if they have a way out.
Yes,
But there
elections.
is no reason to believe that there is any necessity in Kansas City, Missouri for this the exaggerated use of it. I mean, 10 or 12 people can get a petition together in Kansas City, Missouri and have it have enough signatures in a very short time. I think somewhere around 3,000 or 4,000 signatures required would be a good moderate reform to bring this under control, because by gosh, you cannot make important decisions based upon this kind of
Jim,
mechanism.
as you were mentioning, to change the way petition campaigns are conducted, you have to change the city charter, right?
Precisely.
And that's not a simple process.
It's not a simple process, and it's one that would be thoughtfully considered, I think, by the community and by all the voters of Kansas City,
Jim,
Missouri.
we have 1 minute left. Can you explain what's going on with this debate in the Crossroads District, BNIM, architecture, Shirley Helzberg?
Well, it's a great example of what we're talking about, because I think the City Council and the Planning Commission gave thoughtful consideration to that, along with the Tax Income and Financing Committee. Commission, and the proposal is a good one. No one disagrees with that. BNIM is a terrific architectural engineering firm, and they will be a great asset in the Crossroads. The building project proposed by Shirley Helzberg, the same way. It'll be a great asset for that area and for Kansas City, Missouri. If, however, because development timing being what it is, it goes away, the school district will collect even less in the way of taxes, and who knows, BNIM may or may not be in the Crossroads or even Kansas City, Missouri.
Maybe over in Johnson County, some people think. Now it is time for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes give a pat on the back or a kick in the pants to people and events in the news, and we start with Cynthia.
Oh, wow. My roast this morning is to Bart Corman in the Missouri legislation for his House Bill 2059 and for drawing attention to our struggles with ethics reform by actually instituting a bill that would require, or submitting a bill that would require lobbyists to declare sex with legislatures. And so my question is, how would you put a monetary dollar amount on that if the legislatures, the lobbyists, and their aides were to claim that as a gift? Wow. Made me laugh, made my day.
Well, I want to toast the President of the United States. His last State of the Union address was typical of him, although even better, I think, because he is best when he has nothing to lose and when he was eloquent and witty. But I thought the most powerful part of his speech, and I want to toast him for this reason, was when he talked about the fact that we must move away and we must watch ourselves as a country and not choose the pandering to bigots, homophobia, hysteria, climate change,
Deniers,
denialism, and all kinds of refusals to compromise. Compromise is the way a good government works.
Mr. Heater.
I would toast Greg Graves, the CEO of Burns & McDonnell, who announced his retirement from that position a week ago. Greg served as chair of the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce and was really the guiding light for our Big Five initiative. Last year, he received the Chamber's award as Kansas City of the Year, which some people believe is as high an honor as any Kansas Citian can receive. But not only has he done a great job at Burns & McDonnell, making it one of the great engineering firms in the world, but he has done so much for Kansas City through his civic leadership and his philanthropy. So a toast to Greg Graves. It'll be fun to see what his next chapter looks like.
And a big fan of Ruckus.
Indeed he is. He's a big fan of Ruckus.
Toast to the Kansas City Chiefs for continuing our championship season. It's so exciting to watch them play and what it does to the community, from Alex Smith to Jeremy Macklin, Eric Berry, Marcus Peters, Derek Johnson, Travis Kelce. I won't name the whole roster, but you guys know who you are. Congratulations on doing a great job, and good luck and Godspeed on the road to Santa Clara.
Yeah.
And finally, here is a toast to Pulitzer Prize-winning historian Joseph Ellis for Quartet, a book detailing what he terms the Second American Revolution, the transition from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. The quartet, almost as famous as the Beatles, does include a George and John, but no Paul or Ringo, George Washington, John Jay, Alexander Hamilton, and James Madison. Ellis says these four, working behind the scenes, set the stage for creating the Constitution that gave birth to a vibrant nation. And so that is Ruckus for this week. We're back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckettes and the crew, Mike Shannon saying thanks very much for watching and good night.